Blitz is defined as a sudden, savage attack. It is indeed all this. The effect is sure. The premise is simple. It's a basic, primal confrontation, man to man. No excuses are offered, none accepted.
Welcome to the latest edition of Longhorn Blitz with horns247.com.
It's like a radio station.
Now, here are your hosts, lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers,
pure athlete, yeah.
I transcend race, hombre.
Matt Butler.
I don't talk, man. I back it up.
And we are chock full of that, man.
Damn right.
And Jeff Howe.
It's still real to me, damn it.
And that's the bottom line, because Stone Cold said so.
If you're gonna blitz, come strong, but don't come at all.
Coming strong with another edition of Longhorn Blitz with Horns 24/7. I'm Jeff Howe. Let's not waste any time in bringing the rest of the team for this week's show. He is the master of the soundboard, the drop machine extraordinaire, Matt Butler. Matt, how are you, sir?
Doing pretty well. How about yourself?
You're about to send me some kind of chart, graph, something.
Yes, sir. Got a one of the data nerds. I love data nerds out there. Just was like, hey, here's all the targets from 2010 to 2019 for college football. So I'll make sure to give Carter his due credit, give you the handle in a second, but sending this to y'all right now.
Matt, I've got a new name for this time of year. When we call it the silly season, it's the dead season. This is the rabbit hole season.
There you go.
This is the
100%.
time of year where, man, if you want to go down a rabbit hole, you go right ahead. And I went down a couple that I want to get into on this week's show. A man who loves a good rabbit hole, and he loves whether it's pop culture, sports, whatever, he can go down a number of rabbit holes and thrive. He is our lockdown corner here on the show. Lifetime Longhorn, 2002 UT All-American, 2002 semifinalist for the Jim Thorpe Award, fourth-round draft choice of the New York Giants in 2003, spent his NFL career with the Giants, Lions, Bears, Bucks, Broncos, and a year with the Hamilton Tiger Cats in the CFL. When he was done with football, got himself back to Austin, Texas, in the 40 acres, where he earned his degree. Whenever that T-ring comes in, we will make sure he wears it proudly. Nevertheless, he is a card-carrying member of DBU, and when you get that All-American honor recognized by the NCAA, they make sure you get one of those black cards. Number 21 in your program, number 1 in your hearts, Mr. Rod Babers.
Thanks for the intro, brother, as always.
Rabbit hole season, you like that, Rod?
I do like going rabbit holing. I'm a big fan. No
it's also
doubt,
spring, so I bet they align too.
Ah, I like that.
Yeah, Easter,
that's
all that.
See many a rabbit penetrate the fence and get into my yard. My dog having to chase them off. But, such is life. Living near Greenbelt. I told you guys a story about how my dog killed a baby rabbit one time.
Yeah, man. Your dog apparently likes to kill random things in the yard.
The rabbit got in the yard, and my dog just decided, hey, if you cross that perimeter, you're taking your life into my hands. And
enemy.
She killed it and brought me her kill. Like, here, aren't you proud of me? And it was kind of devastating.
She did that for you.
The bunny was struggling to breathe and watched him take his last breath.
Now just wait until
and
you
the
have
dog's
these.
like,
yeah, just wagging its tail. Proudest moment of its
this
life.
thing is suffering.
She was
it is
so
about
happy.
to die.
Yeah,
I must put it out. Did you put it out of his misery?
Oh, he died shortly thereafter, Rod.
Yeah, that's sad.
It'll be a good lesson, though, whenever your daughter learns about the story and arc of life from these things. I remember having my cat bring home dead cats or dead mouse, dead birds, things along those lines.
Before we go down some rabbit holes, I want to go back in the Wayback Machine. And Mac Brown this week, guys, Rod, your former head coach on Florida, brought you to the University of Texas.
That's right. Love me some Mac.
Mac Brown did an interview with the Charlotte Observer, and it was kind of like a Zoom type deal with a couple of different reporters. And he was asked, during your time at North Carolina or Texas, who was one great player that you thought you were going to get who ended up getting away.
And what year was this?
This is Mac did the interview like
he did the interview okay.
He was asked just overall. Like
while sitting around during pandemic.
Okay.
Lots of talking.
And the one recruit he mentioned, now think about all the recruiting misses Mac had, especially late in his tenure. Mm-hmm. But the one he really felt got away was Adrian Peterson. But he felt he had, didn't get him.
One afternoon in October.
Now,
it's true. I can see that.
As a guest of Texas.
I can see that. But
now, I started thinking about this, and it worked out for Texas in the end because Texas.
I was going to say they won a national title.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
But if he's just talking about
that much.
But here's where it got me
on
thinking.
That string.
Put Adrian Peterson on the 2004 Texas team, and go back to that 2004 season, and the one game Texas lost was a 12-0 game to Oklahoma, where Adrian Peterson goes for 225.
Good point.
He was all they had.
If you start thinking about that, okay, because I think we can all agree the 05 team was going to be the 05 team. There was just too much talent, and Vince Young had come into his own, and et cetera, et cetera. Does Texas get to the national championship game a year early and get a crack at USC a year early? and do they take care of business a year early?
You could argue that.
Because you give it to your number one foe, your ultimate enemy. It's their positive gain instead of yours. You get a negative gain. So it really does flip those two. And think about that backfield. It would be arguably the best backfield in the history of football, where you have AD spelling Benson for a few snaps every few series.
Yeah. And you got to throw Vince Young in there too.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Because VY is obviously a big part of it. And then
Selvin, Ramonce.
Ramonce Taylor's a freshman.
Oh,
yeah. Selvin Young had the ankle injury. He didn't play in 04.
Wow.
But,
Do you get Jamal? I don't know if it matters, but
and you can go down and go, well, does this change this and the butterfly effect from all of that?
Not having AD with Oklahoma is the big thing. He didn't have to produce for Texas necessarily.
Right.
He would have produced, of course, because he's a freak. But not having him as the main offensive component for Oklahoma, as you point out, you win that game, and then – man, history is a whole lot
think what
different.
it does to 06 also. Because
that
then you have him against
that 06 team had holes. They weren't good enough.
No,
in my opinion. They would have made them great in the backfield, but they had holes.
Oh, yeah.
And they had injuries. There were bigger injuries.
It would help sustain Colt. Colt wouldn't maybe be beaten up as much. Just having that guy in the backfield. Just saying it would have changed 04 and 06.
04 was a different team than 06.
But recruiting.
04 was, like you pointed out, they were one win away essentially from being a championship team. 06 was probably
just an O-line.
2 or 3, 2.5 wins away.
Because look at that to me, the Texas defense in 04 was better than the defense in 05.
You could argue that's like 08, 09. Right?
You
could argue 08 defense better than 09.
Because you've got Derek Johnson. And that Oklahoma game, guys, to me, if you talk about Derek Johnson's, if somebody says sum up Derek Johnson's Texas career in one game, that's the game for me. It was a loss.
Yeah.
But Derek Johnson was unbelievable that day. And look at what that Texas defense did to Jason White. And this goes back to, when we've had Tim Crowder on the show. Tim's a friend of the show, and Tim says in his time in and around the game, he's never been anybody that understood how to stop a spread offense like Greg Robinson did. Jason White that year against Texas, because keep in mind, the 03 game, he torched Texas.
Yeah.
But in 04, season low marks in completion percentage, passing yards. It was the only game all year he didn't throw a touchdown, and they picked him off twice.
That's impressive.
So Jason White was a non-factor in that game. Yeah. If it's not for Adrian Peterson, Texas wins that game.
I agree. That's a good point.
And then the recruiting just ranked the ability to keep it rolling, because we always talk about that Sims class, and then it's the Roy, B.J. Sloan, and then it's Benson, and then you had the 02 VY. And even though 03 doesn't have one superstar on the front end, it's such a base for that national championship year with Griffin and Crowder and all those guys that came in, that momentum, because I remember at the time people didn't think the 05 class was great. Now, they were great evaluating it. It was just a small class. There was 15 kids. You didn't have much room.
Pound
but
for
the
pound,
amount
Mac
of momentum that somebody like AD had, he's, I guess, in high school football that I can think of just from my perception of it being a Fab 55 kid, that's all you knew until like 2002 came out. You started to have online rankings. There were recruits like Benson, AD, Vince, and those were about the three. There weren't anybody I could remember that was a bigger deal, and AD was on that sort of Benson and Vince level.
Tommy Harris was for me, because for me he was right up the street, and he went to Ellison, which
5-star D tackle.
Ellison High School from my hometown is like a 15-minute drive. So Tommy Harris was for me,
and he earned that group.
But man, you think about Adrian Peterson, guys, and just kind of the freak he is. And I never saw him play high school football. I only saw the tapes and watched the All-American game. Yeah. But the first and only time I've been up close with Adrian, I think it's the only time I've been up close with Adrian Peterson, was at the Texas Relays his senior year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I remember standing next to him and going, I'm like, this dude's a running back? He's built like a freaking defensive end. Like, he's 6'3", and he's 225, and he's jacked, and he's running like in the lower division of the 100 meters. And I'm like, he's running against like a bunch of 5'7" dudes. Like, this isn't fair. Like, it looks like a grown man running against a bunch of little kids.
Those AD stories remind me of the stories that like Rod tells about Vince Young when he was, an 8th or 9th grader. That like, because we were a couple years older than Adrian Peterson, and he was the first kid I remember. LeBron was the first one that's younger than me that I was like, oh my God, this dude could be like amazing. And then Adrian Peterson was the next one that came, really one of the only other ones that have came since.
So it's interesting to think about, but I did a story on that on the side and kind of went down what we talked about. Like, it didn't hurt Texas in 05. It doesn't make that much of a difference, but it could change a lot in 04, and who knows, potentially changes a lot in 06. But Ron, like you said, I think by '06, I think we saw that team had some deficiencies to it.
But it's because it was just you had a young Colt, and you have so many of those transformative leaders that were gone from those teams. They just needed time for that younger crop of great players that Mac had recruited to come of age, and of course that happened in '08 and '09. Notoriously, Mac he hates that. Dislikes that 2007 team.
Well, he did.
Yeah.
He didn't like those 7
He
team.
didn't
I
like
bet
that
you his
07
tune about
team.
that team's probably changed now.
Yeah, no, I'm sure.
In context, but
Right.
one more thing on those 6-1, if you think about it, just because you have to deal with how your team is, because it definitely the more inferior Texas team, but in context to the opponents. That team beat Oklahoma. That team actually only had a non-conference loss to number 1 Ohio State. So even if you still lose that game early on, it comes down to Colt, and it ended up being Jevin Sneed against K-State in a shootout that was like a 48-45 game coming down to the last possessions or whatever, and you end up losing that. Those are the type of games that maybe you can win that conference
There's
with an 80.
two things for me with 06. One, if Colt doesn't get hurt in the K-State game, if they win that game, and then if he's just not a shell of himself for the A&M game, Texas,
Playing hurt.
Mac Brown's probably got another Big 12 championship. And two, if Vermont Taylor doesn't have his situation and gets himself kicked off the team, how different is that 06 offense?
Very much. Could
Yeah,
be.
that's big.
So, all right, enough about 2006 and waxing nostalgia. I want to look at, Rod, this is something that's been out there for years, but now that Bud Elliott is part of the 24/7 Sports roster in our national office, Bud does great work. Now we can look at the blue chip ratio and really break down what it means. And, Bud's definition of the blue chip ratio, he's done this for years. You basically look at a chunk of recruiting cycles and determine, okay, how many within these recruiting cycles, how many blue chips do you have still on your roster? And based on that percentage, how likely is it that you can compete for a national championship? Now, Bud lists the benchmark for national championship contenders at right around 50%. Yep. So outside of the teams that everybody expects, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Bud picked 6 teams that are kind of on the fringes of competing for a national championship that have the roster, the blue chip ratio percentage to do it in 2020. He picked 6 teams. One is Texas A&M. The Aggies are right at 50%. One is USC. SC is right at 50% in terms of their blue chip ratio. Penn State, 58%. Oklahoma, 62%. Florida, 63%. And of the 6, according to Bud's numbers, the highest percentage in blue chip ratio is Texas at 64%. Now, I did a little bit of a deeper dive into the numbers, and it's right around 60, 61%, because I looked at all the scholarships allocated. And right now, as we sit here today, this is going to change. Now, I've got Texas at 86 scholarships accounted for once the rest of the enrollees from the 2020 class get to campus. Now, what factors into that 86? Well, Kennedy Lewis, who was suspended for the spring. I'm still counting Kennedy Lewis' scholarship. I'm counting all the walk-ons who were awarded scholarships last year, assuming some of those carry over. That's Luke Brockermeyer, Russell Hine, Court Jaquist, Justin Mater, and I know for Hank Kudamanos at safety. So those 5 walk-ons got scholarships. You assume those carry over. Tariq Black and Jede Barron factor into that. Does a guy like Peter Pudgick get put on a medical with his heart condition? So don't worry about Texas. Oh, my God, they're a scholarship over. They're going to figure that out, and we'll hear news in the coming weeks that says Tom Herman and staff got this figured out. But, Rod, of those 86, 52 are blue chip recruits, which Bud just considers, according to the 24/7 Sports composite rankings, you're a 4 or 5 star recruit. So 52 out of 86 are in that blue chip mix. And there was a few numbers that jumped out to me. One is the backfield. And go back to that 05 team we just talked about. You definitely had a blue chip quarterback, Vince Young, who's the number 1 recruit in the country. You had a blue chip running back in Jamal Charles leading that group, and Selvin Young was a highly recruited guy. Yep. And so was Henry Melton. I don't remember where Chris Obanaya ranked. Vermont Taylor was a highly recruited guy. So you had a blue chip backfield. And since then, you've been kind of missing pieces. Maybe you had the quarterback, but you didn't have the running backs. You had the running back mix right, but you didn't have quarterback. Texas has both, Rod. Texas right now, and I'm including Darian Brown in this group. Mm-hmm. Texas is set to have 9 scholarships allocated to quarterbacks and running backs in 2020. 7 of those 9 are blue chip guys, 4 or 5 star recruits.
That's a great ratio.
The only 2 that aren't Danny Young, which I think I'm the only one left on the train.
Hey, he's a tool. He's
Keep
a good
hope
tool.
alive.
Niche. He's a bowling ball.
Keep over. He's been there forever too. I feel like he's got that Bo Skis thing
Yeah.
working, where he's just been around.
Rarely
forever.
you a running back like that, though.
So you've got Danny Young and Casey Thompson, who's going to be your
Casey
backup
Thompson.
quarterback.
Yeah.
So, you start looking at that, Rod, and you say, okay, Sam Ehlinger that was a blue chip guy coming out, but you've recruited really well at that position with Hudson Card and Jaquinton Jackson, and then at running back, that position doesn't look remotely similar to what it looked like in Tom Herman's first year, when you had Chris Warren and you had Toneel Carter and Kyle Porter, and the mix didn't work. And now you've got Keontae Ingram, and Roschon Johnson's going to have a full year to learn that position, and you bring Bijan Robinson into that mix. I mean, you're setting up to have one hellacious backfield.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And because of, some of the versatility with those guys, and we know Tom Herman loves to use running backs in the passing game. That's a big part of his pro spreads, that running backs can be threats in the passing game and the running game. And you look at guys like Jordan Whittington and, hell, even Bijan Robinson, some of the film I've watched. He's a guy that can help you out there, and Keontae Ingram as well, even showed that last year. I think that's something also to be excited about. We understand the wide receivers are unproven. You can still get production in the passing game out of those running backs. I think you may see a heavy chunk of the passing game be devoted to those guys in the backfield too. Just because you have so much talent. I mean, you got 5-star talent in that backfield.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, why not just try to find them different ways to get the football? And a lot of those things can be, and we know from watching Devin Duvernay last year, hell, man, a lot of those plays can be long handoffs. Devin Duvernay was just getting long handoffs half the time, 60% of the time. And a lot of his targets were within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. I wouldn't doubt that I would see some of those running backs have those types of numbers. And when it comes to, their distribution in the passing game.
Yeah, if the internet's not cooperating with me, but I did a breakdown.
I heard this on Light the Tower.
Yeah.
So
I kind of
it's good stuff. About 20 catches.
It's rabbit hole season. So I went down a rabbit hole.
No, it was good stuff. That was good stuff.
I went down a rabbit hole on Texas running backs and kind of looked at Keontae Ingram and Roschon Johnson last year relative to Texas backfields of the past, and I got caught up on yards per carry, per carry. I know even that metric, Matt, as you know, that can get distorted too, right? Because you could have 180-yarder and a bunch of 2-yard runs, and it gets distorted. But yards,
Jamal Charles, one of the best in the history of the NFL because of it.
All right, yards per carry. Yards per carry is one of those numbers that, okay, to me, if you're 5+, then you had a pretty good year.
Yeah.
So last year, Keontae Ingram was a 5.9, Roschon Johnson was a 5.3. Do you think about this. When was the last time, prior to last season, when Texas had 2 running backs, don't count quarterbacks because you can go with VY and you can get there easy, because in 05, VY was at 6.8, Jamal Charles at 7.4. Just nuts.
It's ridiculous.
The last time Texas had 2 running backs in the same season averaged at least 5 yards a carry on a minimum of 100 attempts.
Oh, can we say that again?
At least 5 yards a carry.
Okay.
Minimum 100 attempts. 2 running backs did it in the same season.
Sean Mitchell, Ricky Williams.
You are correct, Matt. Sean Mitchell, Ricky Williams did it in 1996.
Off the dome, too.
Well
Ricky was at 6.2. Sean Mitchell at 5.4. So, Rod, we're not going to remember the 2019 Texas backfield as being like this all-time historically great backfield, right? Mm-hmm. With that said, to your point, they're so productive, and you figure they've got room to grow. Keontae Ingram, like we talked about, can you increase that baseline? And Roschon Johnson, just if he can figure out what he's actually doing, it looks like the natural athletic ability really took to that position. You're cooking with peanut oil at that point. And the other thing I figured out,
turkeys
and why you can do
and Chick-fil-A.
Yeah,
why more 20 and 21 personnel groupings are advantageous to you is the reception numbers that both these guys posted. And now I went ahead and broke down these guys as receivers. And Keontae Ingram's 56 catches through 2 seasons. He is the active career leader among all Longhorns in receptions, including anybody that plays the receiver position. So nobody on this roster has caught more passes in their college career than Keontae Ingram. Only Brendan Eagles has more receiving yards than Keontae Ingram in their career. Eagles at 557, Ingram at 412. And Ingram's got 5 touchdowns. That's 1 behind Brendan Eagles and Jake Smith for the active team lead. So check this out. Since 1996, Texas running backs have combined to record 18 seasons with at least 20 receptions.
Okay.
So that's 2 guys doing it in the same season.
All right.
Ingram is one of only 5 Longhorn runners in that stretch to have multiple 20-catch seasons. He's had 2. He had 29 last year, 27 as a true freshman.
Wow.
The other backs do it. Ricky Williams did it 3 times. I think we forget
That
how
makes sense.
versatile Ricky was. Hodges Mitchell did it twice, 1999 and 2000.
Say Hodges.
Cedric Benson did it twice, 2002 and 2004.
Not shocking. He just played so much.
And Chris Ogbonnaya did it twice, 07 and 08.
Hey, 30-40 club.
Also, Rod, think about this. Ingram's 29 catches last year. It's 5th among Texas backs in a single season in the Big 12 era. Chris Ogbonnaya with 46 and 08. Hodges Mitchell had 37 in 2000, 32 in 99, and then Fozzie had 34 in 2010. Those are the only guys that have had more productive years catching the football out of the backfield in the Big 12 era
astounding.
at Texas than Keontae Ingram. I know, right?
We just didn't know he was that productive. I mean, you brought up the numbers in the last Longhorn Blitz podcast of how productive he's been compared to his first year. But, man, I don't know. It's because he was so inconsistent that he developed this bad stigma that and then Rojo was such a blessing in disguise. I mean, you just didn't know Rojo was going to be
work well together.
that aggressive. Yeah, and it's a good point. They probably just complement each other really well. I don't know how they're going to do it now with the running back, the backfield being so loaded. But, yeah, I mean, I think I hated on Keontae Ingram a little too much, too. I just didn't realize he was so productive.
One more thing, guys, in the Big 12 era, Keontae Ingram has the most receptions by a freshman running back in school history with a 27 2 years ago.
And that was with Watson.
Number 2 among freshman backs in that stretch, the 23 Roschon caught last year.
And that's a Tom Herman offense.
That's a Tom Herman thing.
And that's why I loved when you brought up the previous guys to do it, ones that are fresh on the mind. And we talk about a guy like Hodges being sort of behind his time. Now, if he would have been a decade later, it almost aligns perfectly. He was that Ogbonnaya, that Fozzie, those niche guys that can make it to that next level because they're well-rounded, they're quick, they're just fast enough, but they're more durable than expected. And it sort of goes along the lines that you don't have to have this 200 – we'd love to have a Ricky Williams every single year or Deontay Foreman that can go and take it on. But it isn't a necessity, and you're learning more and more and more when you look at Christian McCaffrey and these guys that are like, you could say the top guys. Alvin Kamara's, exactly. I mean, Alvin Kamara couldn't even fit in the SEC 5 years ago. Yeah. That's how bizarre that is.
That's true.
Well, and I think Tom Herman said this too. Like, would he love to recruit another Zeke Elliott? Absolutely, you'd love to have Zeke Elliott if you can get him, right? But
Same like with the Tommy Harris. There are only a few of them.
But that doesn't mean if you don't get that guy that you're incapable of getting quality running backs. There's still quality running backs out there to be had, and then it all goes down to maximizing the skill set.
And that's something we're complimenting Herman on and using it to where almost systemically you're manufacturing production from these areas that.
Duke Catalan at U of H, he was doing that.
Exactly, and that's what's so perfect, though, in context to the sport right now, because if you can be one of the ones that can identify the lesser skilled player and get that niched player to become serviceable or above average, then you're going to have a damn good team.
Have you put those rabbit hole numbers on the site yet? Did you write an article about it?
Yeah.
Okay, I got to go put that.
I'll send you that link, Rod.
Thank you, brother.
I'll help you out.
Yeah, thank you.
So, continuing with the blue chip numbers, the other position group that really jumped out to me, we talked about the backfield, is the defensive backfield. And
yeah.
You look at and this is with Hank Kudamanos, a walk-on taking up a scholarship, right? So I'm factoring him into the scholarship count.
Okay.
Rod, I've got 18, and this is including corners, safeties, and then 2 guys playing that spur position, which real quick.
The nickel, nickel.
Have you been paying attention to Coleman Hustler's Twitter account?
I did see some drills or something the other
Coleman
day.
Hustler, he does like what does he call it? Like a technical Tuesday or technician Tuesday or something. And anyway, he'll put like a training clip on
I think I've seen
his Twitter account on Tuesdays. And he's got, from winter conditioning, he's got clips where Chris Adamore and Anthony Cook are working with the linebackers. So it's that spur position is going to be kind of a versatile. Because we know Chris Ash has talked about he values guys that can cover. And I think we can both agree the two things Anthony Cook and Chris Adamore do really well is they can cover guys.
Yeah.
But now it's all about, okay, you've got to have the multiple skill set to thrive in the nickel in this league. So I just thought it was interesting that the spur position's working out with the linebackers.
Probably trying to teach them run fits and leverage and taking on blocks with with the right shoulder. If you're going to be in, you're going to be in the box.
Yeah.
A lot of times the nickels end up being in the box, especially if they flex you. You got to try to figure out, all right, when I'm run fitting and your eyes too, if you're going to be a part of the rush defense. So yeah, I'm with you. I think it makes sense. I'm not shocked by that.
Yeah, and if it's going to be something that maybe the chaos puts you in that position, you have to know how to use your body and use your skills in that situation. But I also like the idea that maybe we're seeing a trend where coaches, maybe it isn't a fit, maybe it won't work, but it's worth trying it and seeing if it'll work and not being afraid to maybe implement a few things like that inside a game type atmosphere where the risk is a risk, but the reward may outweigh it.
I mean, the Big 12 is still a spread league. It's still the most prolific, progressive offensive league in college football. But you look at it now as, it used to be mostly the air raid spreads. And if you talked about it, Jeff, now you have these these hybrid spread schemes. And there are more teams that are using tight ends and 21 personnel. Oklahoma uses a ton of it. And now you're starting to see Iowa State use a lot of it. You're starting to see teams, Kansas State now is starting to see teams.
Neil Brown of West Virginia wants to use fullbacks.
Yeah, exactly, right? So usually, and nickels are perfectly comfortable being out there covering in the slot, even though it's a really tough thing to do. I'm a cornerback. I'm used to being in space. But what about when they start to shrink that space? What about when they want to test the physicality of these DBs and see if you're going to cover this tight end, can you get off the block of this tight end and make a play in the run game? So I think that's what's about. The Big 12 is kind of changing in that regard. So it might be just a kind of progressive move by the coaching staff.
And you bringing up Neil Brown in West Virginia just makes me think he's going to be getting grad transfers from the military academies to come over every single.
Dude.
I mean, that's how you don't create fullbacks out of high school, but you can go get a grad transfer fullback anywhere.
Neil Brown likes that more of that fullback type.
Oh yeah.
Type H-back, tight end type guy.
Shanahan and Sean Payton, they love fullbacks.
Yep.
And their offense
Harbaugh.
as progressive as anybody. Yeah, Harbaugh loves exactly. The Ravens, Juszczyk came from the Ravens.
Yes.
The Ravens drafted him.
Yeah.
So the teams that are the most progressive offensively, it's crazy that they all still have fullbacks they use a lot.
They have tools that are
Jason
very
Garrett
rare.
likes fullbacks, Rod.
All right, not everybody.
It's a tool that's rare that can make I really think that occupying the mind of the defense really can be a battle that you can be playing from ahead before every snap, which sounds cheesy, but it's the truth.
You got to find the ideal fit, though. It's kind of like the H position for Tom Herman, right? He finds his Jordan Whittington, and he found his perfect, Jake Smith. Those guys are rare to be able to fit the prototypical fullback in today's progressive age, not the old school fullback. Now you need a Juszczyk. Now you need somebody who can be really, really versatile. Or you get like Sean Payton, you got like 3 or 4 of those guys, and you moneyball the position overall.
Yeah, you're trying to
Taysom Hill is
in recruiting. You're definitely not going out looking for high school fullbacks. You're looking for
an athlete.
You're looking for a running back or a flex tight end and say, okay, I can make him kind of fit what I want.
Or somebody that your defensive coordinator is calling a bust at linebacker that you need to make use of a scholarship.
That's kind of what Andrew Beck ended up being. Like, I don't know if he's going to help
Blaine
us
Irby was.
No,
but he was a linebacker. I know it wasn't technically we wanted it, but I remember him being sold as a linebacker recruit. They're like, no, spin it around. It's just always a good idea to look at the like position on the other side that, if he doesn't work here, you can maybe make a linebacker be a tight end or a fullback.
But I remember specifically Andrew Beck, the first fall practice of his freshman year, getting out there, and he's a linebacker, and then he's running running the gauntlet, doing the crossfield catch drill.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember Sean Watson saying, out of that practice the day before, or he talked about it later, he's like, and I remember watching that drill, like, man, Andrew Beck's got really good hands.
Yeah.
And Sean Watson saying, a few practices later, we moved back to tight end because I watched him run that gauntlet, and he's got really good hands, really good hand-eye, and we could use him at tight end.
Well, the league believes that he also is a good fullback / tight end, so he's still there.
And we give credit where credit's due. If Sean Watson identifies a good talent, he flipped it over.
Hey, Sean Watson knew about fullbacks. That's for damn sure.
Hey, tight ends
and
man.
fullbacks.
True tight end you. You had 3 NFL tight ends.
Yeah, you're right. Side
that
end,
2014 offense.
Yeah, that's Nebraska football, baby.
Kid from Nebraska.
One was playing quarterback, and
It's what I think of watching at Nebraska.
one was a linebacker recruit. And yeah, so don't like to think about that era of Texas football. But anyway, no, I don't think we need to overthink it either, Rod, on the Chris Adam Moore, Anthony Cook thing. That's also to get your best guys on the field, because you look at corner, your depth at corner. I mean, with Deshaun Jameson, Jalen Green, Josh Thompson coming off the injury, and Kenyatta Watson, you're too strong, too deep at corner.
Very true.
And then at safety, I mean, good luck cracking that too deep.
Yeah, I mean,
Especially with B.J. Foster moving back there. You've got Chris Brown, Caden Sturz. I mean, your top three guys. That's going to be somebody not starting that would start anywhere else in the country.
And maybe that, and maybe all of that can alleviate some of the concerns about the depth at linebacker. I know we're not getting into that right now. We're talking secondary. But, putting more of those secondary guys on the field, less linebackers on the field.
Best 11 that fit together.
Well, check this out. So 18 scholarships being allocated in the secondary, Rod. 14 of those factor into your blue chip number.
Wow. Yeah, that's that's DVU worthy right there. I mean, it's pretty phenomenal how they've turned around certain positions, and that makes sense too. If you're adapting to the Big 12, what do you want to load up on? You're going into a conference that has not only the most elite quarterback play in college football, but also probably the best receiver play in college football overall, week after week. You just stockpile cover guys, stockpile secondary defenders, and they've done that. Now you gotta develop them. And even Tom Herman hinted that we may not be developing all that talent in the secondary like we need to.
Yeah, that's something he's talked about a lot this offseason. He did it in the Q&A with us, and he's continuing to make the rounds. He did a chat with Chuck Carlton with the Dallas Morning News. He did a Q&A with Football Scoop, and I think where I caught it was he did an interview with Tiki and Tierney on CBS Sports Radio, and he was talking about the trajectory of the program.
Yeah.
And that's what he said. He's like, the criticism last year was they didn't do a good job developing their young guys, so that when you did have injuries, guys weren't ready to step in and go play. Like we said, you take a problem, which was your depth or lack thereof, and you exacerbated that problem because you either didn't develop guys, you didn't coach them well, whatever the case was.
Whatever it was.
We saw it on the field. I mean, Tom Herman's not speaking out of turn. I mean, the numbers and the tape is there to prove it.
You should have been able to absorb those injuries considering those numbers.
Yes.
Looking at those numbers, it shouldn't have been – I mean, I know it's going to be a drop-off when you lose a starter. Of course there is. But the drop-off shouldn't have been as precipitous as it was. I mean, that thing fell off a cliff when all your top guys got hurt. As a matter of fact, they started off the season hurt is what most people are saying about Caden Stearns. So the drop-off was too significant. And that's why I think Tom Herman's like, why am I recruiting all these 4- and 5-star DBs if when one of the starter gets hurt that basically they're playing like two stars and 3 stars. That's not their fault. That's our fault.
Yeah.
Oh, not our fault, but coach's fault.
Yes.
I'm playing Tom Herman right there.
But it just spot on with you talking about the evaluation, and you have the good players, and then everybody in the world knows that they're good. And the thing is that's why you wish you had that depth, because whenever they step into those situations, at least now you can say, well, you have that learning experience. But you want to get to that point where it was whenever you watch like your defensive back. I watched some of your games recently that have been on LHN, and just seeing guys like Cedric Griffin and Michael Huff as young players when they came in, and it's like, wow, these dudes are flying around. Yeah, exactly, and that's just where you want to be.
So, the other part, Rod, of being better in the secondary, which when you look at the numbers, I mean, you can stats. John Madani said it perfectly a few years ago. Rod, one of our mentors in this business, Matt, you as well. I mean, stats are like a bikini. They show you a lot, but they don't show you everything. And you can look at the numbers from last year, and it's the worst pass defense in school history in terms of opponent completion percentage allowed and yards per game allowed. And again, you can dissect those numbers however you want, but they are what they are. I mean, they're going to be there forever. That the 2019 pass defense was the worst in school history at fill in the blank. But what can help you is if you're better on the defensive line, and looking at your blue chip numbers defensively, Rod, on the D line, you get 16 scholarships right now allocated for defensive linemen. That's including the guys working that jack position. You got 8 factoring into your blue chip mix. So probably not as high as you would want, but still, I mean, the guy of those 8 guys, 7 of them were recruited by Tom Herman exclusively. I mean, they had to hang on to Taquan Graham, but Jacoby Jones, Keandre Coburn, Alfred Collins, Prince Dorba, Joseph Osai, Myron Warren, Vernon Broughton, all those guys were recruited by Tom Herman.
Really young. So,
yeah.
I mean, a couple of those guys aren't even on campus yet, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't.
Collins, Dorba, Broughton. Those guys are all true freshmen. Warren redshirted last year. So
and I love Keandre Colburn. I mean, I think like you guys too. And so Joseph Asai is now added to that with the Jack.
Yep.
And we all know Joseph Asai is next level freaky. I mean, he could end up having a great year and not even be here for his entire 4-year career. So I'm with you. I like the upside of the D line just because of how young all those prospects are. You can see they're starting now to double down to get the best D linemen in the state. There aren't a ton of them, but you see they're doubling down. Now we gotta make a push to get the better D linemen in the state year after year to try to bulk up that D line. So I like the upside there. And adding Joseph Osai with Joseph Osai and Taquan Graham at the defensive ends, I'm telling you,
Graham's gonna be playing the 3 technique.
Huh?
Graham's going to be playing the 3 technique.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Moving down.
So you have Bimage playing the end, which Marquez Bimage is a guy that we've been hearing for years. Like, hey, he's probably the best natural pass rusher we've got. All right, now we're really going to see how good of a pass rusher is he.
And if you talk about the way that makes the line
nice
fill out,
line.
when you put somebody like Taquan Graham in an area where you not necessarily expect defensive pressures on the quarterback, and then now you're able to put not only a guy like Osai in a more natural position, you have a youngster that sort of has a manufactured pressure position, and then you're putting one of your best pressure guys further in. That's starting to align more like one of those NASCAR-type lines that can come from the closest to the football and has the multiplicity that if it isn't working, if there's an injury on the outside, you can always bump out.
Guys out.
Yeah, because Keandre Coburn's is a beast, and he's so huge. So, yeah, that's a good way to fill out a
I like
line.
that idea, actually, Taquan Graham. I mean, he's a guy that played both inside and outside anyway.
Anything else you guys, because I've got the blue chip breakdown by position. Anything else you guys want to look at that might stand out? I mean, I can tell you right now, linebacker is the one position where it's not looking good.
Yeah. What's that linebacker number?
Well, including the 3 walk-ons, 10 scholarships allocated to linebackers, and this is with the Marvion Overshown moving over. 10 linebackers, 3 blue chips.
Oh. I gotta write that down.
I wonder what
10 scholarships for linebackers, only 3 blue chips.
That'd be DeMarvion Overshown.
Oh, that's the guy started out at safety for you.
Yeah, that's a guy that hasn't played a snap of linebacker yet, Rod.
And I'd like to look at
Delia Dayaway and David Benda. Those are your 3 blue chip linebackers. But that's also the 10. I'm not including Tyler Owens in that mix. But
I get some snaps there.
But I am including Jaden Hullaby, the true freshman, potentially getting a look there. And also the 3 walk-ons that got scholarships: Luke Brockermeyer, Court Jaquez, and Russell Hine.
Man, that's why Tom Herman's so concerned about that position. You just are bereft of talent there.
When you got 3 former walk-ons that you gave scholarships to, you're really concerned about it.
Linebacker is at now where running back was when Tom Herman first got here. In terms of talent, it may be the least talented position on the 40 acres right now. Period.
Yeah.
Like just in terms of just raw talent. I mean, wide receivers unproven talent. That doesn't mean they don't have any.
No,
it's just unproven.
You've got 11 scholarships allocated to wide receivers right now, 8 factor into that blue chip mix. And I didn't even factor. I used where we ranked Tariq Black as a transfer, which is transfer ranking, was as a 3-star. He's a 4-star prospect coming out of high school. So if you wanted to get technical and include Tariq Black's high school ranking, then that's 9 out of 11 factor into your blue chip mix.
Man, that's
so
scary.
like you said, Rod, it's unproven talent, but you got talent at receiver. Tight end, you've got 2 out of 4 with Epps and Braden Liebrock, and then Wiley and Cade Brewer don't factor into that mix. But
still that's talent though at tight end.
Yeah,
like you say. So you don't. Cade Brewer's not considered in that group.
He's not in the blue chip mix.
Interesting,
because he's a 3-star guy.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So was Jared Wiley.
Yeah,
you're
but I can see Tom Herman with that specific position because of I truly believe he values tight end, and we know that because of his rigidity with the 11 personnel. That he's almost like how Shanahan is with his fullbacks. Like he's got a specific type of player in mind.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think Cade Brewer kind of fit that. Wiley probably fits that to a certain degree, and he thinks he can mold those guys with that raw material, that raw clay, into his perfect 5-tool tight end.
Yeah.
So I can see him going, no, that 3-star, no, I like him. That guy, and it helps to have a Lake Travis guy, going.
Yeah.
Yeah,
School.
especially when
That's
you're
always
trying to
good,
get a
too, when you're
quarterback
trying to
from there.
recruit at Lake Travis.
Yes,
It's never
and
a bad thing.
since we're on the name, this is a good corollary because before the show, I showed y'all like who was a guy that had a blow up senior year, and the best example ever you could find was a guy like John Harris
Yeah.
going
That was
2
unbelievable.
targets, 3 targets, 9 targets as a junior, 97 targets as a senior. Well, right now, Cade Brewer, freshman, 10 targets, sophomore, 2 targets, junior, 14 targets. See where he ends up this year. He's a guy that had 3 years of being on the field, not very much involvement in the pass game. Who knows if he could be a guy that could take that step, but he sort of aligns with that type of person.
Yeah, and he's more of a proven commodity than most of their wide receivers to this point. It kind of goes back to what we were talking about. We were talking about that 04 team, and I always said this team is going to be, to me, kind of like it's going to be 04-ish. You know what I mean? Wide receivers, I don't know if that's where a ton of your production is going to come from. There'll be plays made there, but I think it's going to be backfield, and I wouldn't doubt if a tight end like those 04 teams came out and they were like a big part of the passing game.
Can we say this, Rod? If you include the H's in that mix, which I think the H's are going to produce, right, like what we saw from Jake Smith last year.
Oh, no question.
And when we think about Jordan Whittington.
No doubt.
This is going to be a between the hashes offense.
Oh, I like that. I like where you're going there. Yeah. In terms of so you're saying they're not going to be able to stretch the field.
I think
they
they
don't have
horizontally
receivers
as much.
on the outside that are as involved as, say, a guy in recent years. So maybe just the way, and especially if you're talking
true with
about
Colin
the
Johnson.
run game, yeah.
To borrow a Brian Harsin term, I think your vertical shots and your outside the number stuff, that'll be kind of the silver bullets you save for when you really need them. Your meat and potatoes is going to be between the hashes.
I agree with that. Just because of the backfield, even the passing game with the run.
Because last year you were a perimeter offense, whether it's Colin Johnson working a short game into the boundary, or like we said, Duvernay. A lot of his stuff was to the numbers or outside and get him in space on a bubble or something.
Yep.
You were a perimeter offense.
Even
last
with
year.
Brandon Eagles early on,
Yeah,
chunking it deep. And I will say, 2018, you were a kind of I agree with you, a perimeter, like a vertical
because
offense.
LJ, Duvernay, and Colin were still your main 3 guys. And
Yeah.
that's one good thing about Tom's offense, though, and the way that just manufacturing, you can still get the low-hanging fruit out there. Those screens, it's more conceptual stuff. If you have good blocking receivers, if you have good tight ends, good mobile linemen like Cosme, you can still do those things on the perimeter without top-end talent. Now, you lose 2 NFL draft picks, which is really good talent, but it's not to say that other schools across college football don't get production from those type of schematic plays that get offense manufactured. So at least you can get some of that, but the focus and your strength is going to be an area in the middle where the opposing teams may actually be deficient.
Yeah, I like that.
The interesting position, Rod, and I agree with you, linebacker at this point, it's the least talented and the most questionable position on this roster.
Yeah, and linebacker, just while you're going into it and talking about that, I just went through the composite 247. There are 19 linebackers out of the 247 players. So, I was sort of curious thinking, how many blue chip linebackers are in comparison to your overall scholarship athletes. So it's more research to be done, but there's 19 of the top 247 counting inside linebacker and outside linebackers in the top 247. So more research to be had, but worth pointing out that may be an area where in comparison to scholarships given out to blue chip ratio, I don't know what 3 of 10. 3 of 10 is not good, but I would just be curious, and I'll look into it next week.
Guys, I think it speaks more to, Texas, their situation reflects kind of where the college game is at linebacker, and even at 24/7 Sports, this is a company, how we're evaluating it, which if you look at all the linebackers drafted, Rod, in the draft this year, I think there were 23 linebackers taken. None of them weighed above 240 pounds. So we talk about, it trickles down. No, it's trickling up. I think the NFL is now realizing, look, if we're all going space and pace, we can't have the 260-pound thumper. He's a dinosaur now.
Doesn't make sense. He's a liability.
Yeah.
He's a liability on every down. Well, now every down in football. It used to be like first down maybe, but now people are trying to pass more on first down.
Exactly.
On every down, you're essentially a liability. And that's why for the first time in the history of the Big 12, you had 2 Big 12 linebackers drafted in the first round.
Yep.
History of the conference. And we all agree. We're like, man, I didn't know they were that good. You know what I mean? Even the kid from Texas
Jordan
Tech,
Brooks.
people were a little surprised by that.
I was. I was like, that's when I was like, the NFL's finally waving back.
The NFL
and they're coming here to get
They
play.
are. Well, we know that because they went to Iowa State, right, to study John Heacock and his defense. And they're all in love with Gary Patterson and his players. Gary Patterson coaches a defensive player. The NFL will draft that guy in the first round, even if a lot of Big 12 fans like us who have looked at the guy like, I don't know if he was first round worthy. The NFL likes those types of players because they know that Gary Patterson has done a really good job of adapting his defense to the Big 12 style of play. And John Heacock's probably done as good a job as anybody out there as well. And the NFL wants to know schematically what they're doing, but also philosophically what you're doing. And what do John Heacock and Gary Patterson do? They like hybrids. And they start to, even their linebackers all become hybrid players, right? Their linebackers are fast and undersized. So I totally get the Big 12. And even look at Patrick Queen. Patrick Queen is basically a Big 12 linebacker. That's all. LSU's a Big 12 linebacker.
I go back to this article that Kevin Flaherty did last year, 24/7 Sports. Kevin's a good friend. He does a phenomenal job.
He does good work.
And he was talking about linebacker play shifting in the Big 12. And this was Kevin posted this August 30th, 2019, so right before last season started.
I read this article, if I'm not mistaken.
And I'll just because this is the money quote. It said Pittsburgh Steelers coach Mike Tomlin certainly knows his way around a successful defense. And when a longtime Big 12 assistant asked about the need to start finding linebackers with legitimate track times, he replied with a quote he once heard from Tomlin. Look like what you hunt, he recalled Tomlin saying.
I remember that.
So,
it's a great quote.
And I think now, Rod, at 24/7 Sports and Barton Simmons and Charles Power and our guys on the National Rankings Council, they've kind of shifted. And we've done this with other positions. We've done it with tight ends. Offensive line was one where I know our guys started looking at things more like wingspan and foot quickness and things
with
that
the
actually
those hybrid
translate.
DNs,
And so all that said, I think they're really looking at the linebacker position and saying, okay, what really matters? Okay, athleticism above all else matters.
Yep.
You can be the most physical C-gap to C-gap thumper possible, but if you can't stay on the field, the definition, Rod, the bottom line is the definition of a third down linebacker now, of 3-down linebacker now, compared to 5 years ago is drastically different.
No doubt. It's sleeker, faster, undersized. Not undersized. See, I said it. They are just they're just sleeker and faster models. You keep saying they're undersized. They're undersized compared to
what we
the
used
old
to know.
model, the old prototype.
The new normal is Malik Jefferson.
The new normal is kind of a Malik Jefferson. I agree with that 100%. I mean, that's what you pretty much want. And Big 12 linebackers, I think also linebackers is a tougher position to be able to evaluate these days. I think you were right about that, Jeff. I think if you go to at the high school level now, a lot of these linebackers are experiments. You know what I mean? They were a great athlete in high school that also had an element of physicality, but they can run. You know what I mean? Like Gary Johnson ended up being, a track star, but also guy that can thump. And you're starting to see more of that. I mean, Gary Patterson's famous for it, right? Gary Patterson's famous for taking some guy who was playing tight end and going, you're a Big 12 linebacker, you just don't know it yet. Or a safety and telling them, no, you're a Big 12 linebacker.
Can I read you this quote from Gary Patterson that's in
Yeah.
Kevin's story? So Kevin asked Gary Patterson at Big 12 Media Days last summer kind of about the linebacker position. And this is Gary Patterson. What is a Mike linebacker? We don't have a middle. The A-gap guy, most of ours here lately have been running backs or safeties. In this league, you better have linebackers who can vertical wide receivers or at least run with them a little bit. The prototype of the Big Ten linebacker, they're 240, 250 pounds. That's a hard guy to play with in certain schemes in this league unless you're not going to get any vertical speed races. That's been one of the things that's helped us play defense. Traven Howard, who's with the Chargers, was a safety. Garrett Walla was a safety. Montrell Wilson was a safety.
Yeah. He's just hybrid.
Basically, Kenneth Murray was a high school safety. Basically, you're looking at safety conversions and spinning them down a linebacker.
Exactly.
And to your point, just like while I still have this list of y'all's top linebackers, is LSU's one of their top recruits, 6'1", 200 linebacker Josh White from Cy Creek. You weren't seeing 6'1", 200 as an inside linebacker recruit 5 years ago.
Yeah, he's going to add 15, 20 pounds on him.
Easy.
And
Perfect.
Then he's going to be perfect.
He's exactly what he's chasing.
It'll slow him down like a couple of milliseconds, but that won't matter where he's playing. He'll still be able to match speed for speed.
And that athleticism makes his, say, what would be a catch radius or what your length is and what your ability. You can defend a 6'4" tight end, a guy like a Gronk. It's why you see, Tyrann Mathieu, some of his video. I retweeted one of his recent skill sets, but you can see a guy like him so diminutive, playing only between the hashes, making amazing plays, and doing it against guys twice his size because he's down off of, it could be your top tight ends, could be, one of the top wide receivers on a team. It doesn't matter. His skill set can match it. And then when you have that athleticism, it's the quandary factor that we talk about too. When you mentally can identify and then say you're hyper athletic in that 6-foot frame, you can play with a 6'3" guy, but then you can identify beforehand. And you can actually, when you're smarter in identifying stuff that other people don't identify, that's what quarterbacks don't see. And that's what they go and make those great plays, picking passes off and things along those lines. So just finding that mix of a football IQ and then find a body type that's similar, but the body type might be overvalued.
Here's kind of the money measurables, Rod. So Barton Simmons, our director of scouting, looked at the linebackers drafted in 2018.
Yeah, I read this article.
Okay, and when they were high school prospects, those linebackers who were drafted average height between 6'2" and 6'3", weight 205. There were 5 drafted linebackers that 24/7 Sports had testing numbers on. Average 40 time of 4.5, average shuttle time of 4.2, average vertical at 36.5.
This is coming out of high school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There were 5 top prospects, 5 blue chip linebackers who went undrafted in that 2018 draft, who were blue chip guys coming out of high school. They had size. They averaged about 221 pounds apiece, but in terms of athleticism, average 40, 4.75. Average shuttle, 4.52. Average vertical, just over 31 inches.
Yeah.
So
athleticism
is
it trumps the size factor that
big time.
You just want a guy that just looked the part, right? It's like, I don't give a damn if a linebacker looks the part. I need a linebacker to be able to run and to be able to keep up with wideouts and the Alvin Kamaras and the Christian McCaffreys and the Jordan Whittingtons of the world. That's what you need.
The other number I wanted to get to in this blue chip ratio before we wrap things up today is the offensive line. And when you look at the offensive line, Rod, it's so interesting. Scholarships allocated to the offensive line right now is set to be 15.
I like that. Investment.
10 blue chips.
Ooh.
Really good, right?
That's elite.
That does not include Sam Cosmi. That does not include Derek Kerstetter.
Which is amazing.
Wow.
2 starters and your best one.
Now that is mind-blowing. I forget Cosmi was a 3-star guy.
This makes it more like 04 than you could ever imagine, Rod. Like, to think about, because you had a good 2000, 2001, 2002 offensive line, but the youngsters that whenever you saw Vince start to be put into games in 03, they brought in an entire wave. They would bring in 5 offensive linemen to sub for 5 offensive linemen. Go watch. They talk all about how special this is and how – but you had to, if you have Vince Young as your running back or as your quarterback, he's not going to be – I mean, you have to teach these guys totally different principles as linemen than you could have had before when you had Major, Sims, Mock, or anything like that. That's when they actually turned Mock into being a running quarterback sort of as the backup, because they still would run zone read, because once you let those youngsters of Sinline and Studdard to come in and relieve and then align with a young Blaylock, then you're able to have that zone scheme that was a little bit different than you had before on the offensive line, and it just shows that you could have that much talent as a wave of youngsters, and that's sort of where we're at right now, where you're talking about, you have your top first-round pick, guy that's going to be gone. You got another good set of guys, but what's behind them? Blue chippers all across the line, and that's rare.
So this, Rod, gets me to the point when you talk about offensive and defensive lines and winning along the line of scrimmage and why it's so paramount for Tom Herman and this thing to work out for the health of this program. You can't afford to reset the clock on the offensive lineman and defensive lineman you've recruited. If you can win and develop these guys and they do hit their ceilings, you could be in for a really nice run, because like we talked about with those young defensive linemen, think about this, those 10 blue chip offensive linemen, you know how many of them are going to be juniors and seniors on this roster next year?
How many?
1.
Damn.
That's
Denzel
that next
Okafor.
wave. That's that Blaylock, Studdard,
Denzel
Sinline.
Okafor, that's it. That's Tyler Johnson, Reese Moore, Jake Majors, Isaiah Hookfin, Junior Angulau, Logan Parr, Jalen Garth, Andre Carrots. Yeah.
Herb Hand doing work.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That is very, very promising. Actually.
And
that
because
just
you've
left
got
me
production at
in
the
a
top
really good
end.
mood. Just randomly got in a really
he is.
good
You
mood.
can see
to
he's
say that.
nice and happy.
That is, yeah. I mean, that's phenomenal. I didn't realize it. I knew they were investing in the offensive line. We knew that, and they were doing it to the point where they could sit guys and develop them develop guys. They
For the
didn't
first
want-
time. No Trey
exactly.
Hopkins
They didn't
being
want to
thrown
have
in.
to, out of some desperation, have to play the young guys, which we've seen time and time
Hopkins
again.
is
You
stale.
can see inconsistent development with offensive line when you got to throw them in the mix. So I love the fact that they've been letting these guys kind of develop, really kind of cultivating their talent with Herb Hand. Whether you love Herb Hand or not, I don't know. He's still got a lot to prove too. But with that kind of talent, it's going to be hard for him to screw that up.
Yeah, and I love seeing this blue chip ratio because I thought about it whenever you first shared. I think you retweeted the article and then went and looked, and I was like, all right, this is something for the next year that to start a line. Okay, this is a great thing at looking at players coming in, and then we sort of talk about your bust rates and evaluating. Our process that we had always done is after their collegiate effect. So now to see the correlation between the two going forward, I'm really interested to start charting just where those top-end blue chip guys, how many of them become your college contributors, your NFL caliber guys. How many of those guys become your bust? And then, okay, well, on the low end, it sounds like this group right now, when you got your guys like your Cosbys or your Cade Brewers, those are the 3-star type guys that aren't your blue chippers yet, have big roles.
Throw him into that mix.
There
too.
you go. So you got those guys. And that's sort of what we had been asking and wanting from Texas is finally get to the point where you're developing those low-end guys into NFL guys. And that's when you could come across a roster like 08, 09 and your Colt McCoys blend well with your blue chippers and vice versa across the board. So it'll be interesting to see because this is a great way to just basically summarize and have a quantifiable aspect of development where you have the blue chip. We already talked about the post-production evaluation. How do those correlate? Hopefully they correlate highly because that'll mean you have very high development.
But in terms of development, like you look at these numbers now, that's a lot on Oscar Giles. That's a lot on Mark Hagan, and that's a lot on Herb Hand. Because what Herb Hand's got, you don't have any juniors or seniors in terms of your roster, like where they're listed out on the roster, that are in that blue chip mix. But your third-year guys, those redshirt sophomores, are Reese Moore, Rafidi Gramai, Christian Jones was a 3-star, but you're going to have to start to figure out, okay, what do you really have with some of these guys? Tyler Johnson, Isaiah Hookfin, like where can these guys help you? Can you develop these guys? You've got the pieces. Now go develop them. See how good you are at developing. And that's what we talk about, Rod. Like, can Tom Herman and this staff develop? We don't really know.
We don't know.
We don't know yet.
And we don't know what the mystery is as to what the disconnect, right? Why they are being able to recruit players and get the really high blue chip ratios and yet on the other end not produce the NFL talent. That's why, going back to your point you made weeks ago, big year for Tom Herman and his overall culture and philosophy and blueprint, because if you don't start getting, the Caden Stearns, and if Cosme somehow drops into the second round because of the production and, Joseph Asai underachieves, you're going to start thinking to yourself, man, these dudes can't develop talent. They all need to go. Or Tom Herman's blueprint is wrong, because we know the talent is there, as we've always said.
Yeah.
And we know Charlie couldn't do it, and later on in Mac's tenure, he couldn't develop that talent either. And we were hoping that Tom Herman can do that. And that's the only way you're going to be able to, maximize that blue chip ratio and compete for a championship. We know that.
Like, just, again, for the health of the program, you should be hoping it works out under Tom Herman, that he gets it figured out, because
No question.
Rod, if you got to get a new coaching staff in here after this season and reset this clock again and do this all over again, that 2 years from now we're sitting here having this same conversation,
they won't. Unless he doesn't make a bowl game. That's the only way that Tom Herman won't come back next year, especially with the pandemic. There's no way. There's no way with all that going on.
Here's where you're gonna.
If you say Shaka, it's damn sure gonna shave Tom Herman.
But here's where you're gonna
COVID
need
ain't
it.
killing everything.
Where you're really gonna need it, though, regardless of jobs, that you can get that debate. That's a different conversation for a different time. You need it to help you in recruiting, because if you don't start having results on the field,
that's true.
You can only sell the future for so long in recruiting. And I think you're starting to see it some with this 2021 class of guys like, are you going to win? You didn't win last year. We thought you were going to win. LSU just won a national championship.
You're right.
Nobody's taken the Big 12 away from Oklahoma yet. Lincoln Riley's recruiting really well. So it's –
Dave Aranda's recruiting pretty well.
It is a pivotal time for Tom Herman. Like, and it's like, you got a couple really good recruiting classes, right? But that doesn't stop.
No.
You have to keep stacking talent on talent on talent
No
to
question.
get to where you want to be. If you want to be where Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson are, that's what those programs do year after year.
Amen, bro.
That's what Mac was doing
Mac
back in
did.
the day,
I
right?
was gonna say, that's what Mac did for from 99 to what 2006, something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, he basically had top 5, top 10 recruiting classes year after year.
Honestly, all the way up till 9-10 now.
Maybe
that
you're right. Yeah, I
valuation.
forgot. Yeah, I'm tripping. Yeah, Gary Gilbert too.
So, all right, well, that's going to do it for this week's show. Rod, thanks for everything, man.
Always fun, brother.
Matt, appreciate the time.
Oh, you're more than welcome.
For Matt, for Rod, for everybody at the Austin Radio Network and the Horn, 104.9, 101.9, AM 1260, streaming on the Horn app and at hornfm.com, where you can get Rod B each and every weekday on the Triple Option Afternoon Show.
Shameless plug.
You can also catch myself and Craig Way each and every weekday on Light the Tower from 10 to noon. And thanks to Matt, you can get all of our archives, classic interviews, classic shows on the Longhorn Blitz SoundCloud page.
Yep, just type in Longhorn Blitz.
And don't forget to find us on anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify. Just search Horns 24/7 Podcasts. You get us, State of Recruiting, and the flagship just by searching Horns 24/7 Podcasts. For the Horn family, for the Horns 24/7 family, I'm Jeff Howe. Thank you so much for downloading and listening, and we will catch you again on the next episode.
You've been listening to Longhorn Blitz with horns247.com. Remember, for the latest Longhorn news 24/7, visit horns247.com.